The little girl sat alone in the corner of the bustling corporate party, her eyes lowered as executives in tailored suits passed without noticing her. Her small hands fidgeted nervously with the hem of her dress, but no one paid attention. No one except Daniel Carter, who recognized the quiet isolation in her expression because he had seen that same loneliness in his own daughter's face many times. Daniel hadn't wanted to attend the company gala at all. As a mid-level IT manager and single father, these formal events were exhausting obligations that stole time from his daughter, Sophie. But tonight he had no choice. His babysitter had canceled at the last minute, forcing him to bring Sophie, despite knowing how uncomfortable such gatherings made her feel. Sophie had been deaf since birth, and at 12 she had already experienced more isolation than most children ever should. They had arrived at the elegant hotel ballroom an hour earlier, and Daniel had immediately been pulled into conversation by colleagues eager to discuss the upcoming merger. Sophie found a quiet seat near the refreshment table, a book resting open in her lap as she occasionally glanced up to observe the crowd around her. Daniel's supervisor soon approached, clapping him on the shoulder and reminding him that the CEO had arrived an opportunity. He insisted for Daniel to make an impression. Daniel nodded, but scanned the room for Sophie first. She remained in her corner, though her attention was now fixed on a young girl entering with a tall, commanding man in an expensive suit. The CEO, Victor Langford, accompanied by his daughter. The girl looked no older than 8 or 9, her dark curls framing her face, and her blue dress matching her father's tie. What caught Daniel's attention, however, was not her appearance, but the way she observed the room, carefully tracking lips, expressions, and gestures with practiced intensity. He recognized the signs immediately. When he asked his supervisor, he confirmed that the girl Maya was deaf, having lost her hearing as a toddler after illness. Daniel watched as Victor was surrounded by executives, leaving Maya standing beside him, clutching his sleeve. Conversations flowed around her, occasionally interrupted by sympathetic glances, but no one truly engaged with her. It was a painfully familiar sight. The quiet exclusion Sophie had faced so often. Excusing himself, Daniel crossed the room and approached Sophie, signing gently that he believed another deaf girl was nearby and asking if she wanted to say hello. Sophie's eyes brightened instantly, and she eagerly followed him through the crowd. When they reached Maya, Daniel knelt to her level and signed an introduction. For a moment, Maya simply stared in surprise, then her face lit up with joy as she responded, explaining that no one else there signed. Sophie stepped forward, and within seconds the girls were immersed in lively conversation, their hands moving rapidly, their expressions animated with understanding that required no translation. Victor noticed the exchange and approached, astonished that Daniel knew sign language. Daniel explained he had learned it for Sophie long before she could walk. Victor admitted he had struggled to find the time to learn himself while managing both his company and single parenthood. They spoke candidly as the girls laughed together, and Victor remarked that he had rarely seen his daughter so happy at an event like this. Learning that Daniel worked in IT, Victor mentioned the company's plans to expand accessibility initiatives and suggested Daniel lead the effort, valuing his personal perspective. Daniel accepted with gratitude. Victor then asked whether Sophie might spend time with Maya outside work functions, something that clearly meant a great deal to both girls. As the evening unfolded, the girls' laughter began to draw attention. Executives who had once ignored Maya watched with fascination, some even asking Daniel to teach them basic signs. By the night's end, a small group attempted greetings and thanks in sign language, laughing at their awkwardness. When it was time to leave, Maya hugged Sophie tightly and signed her thanks for simply noticing her. On the drive home, Sophie excitedly described the night, signing about her new friend and how others had finally seemed to see them. Daniel reflected quietly, realizing that sometimes people simply needed guidance to connect. The following week brought emails arranging both a meeting about accessibility initiatives and a play date for the girls. Over the next months, Daniel's responsibilities grew as accessibility programs expanded. Sign language classes were introduced, and inclusive policies reshaped the company culture. Meanwhile, Sophie and Maya formed an unbreakable friendship that strengthened both families. 6 months later, at the annual charity event, Victor surprised the audience by beginning his speech entirely in sign language while Daniel interpreted aloud. He shared how a simple introduction from an IT manager had changed his perspective on leadership, showing that true leadership involved seeing those overlooked and building bridges across barriers. He announced the creation of a foundation supporting deaf education and accessibility, appointing Daniel as its director. Sophie squeezed her father's hand proudly, telling him he had changed everything. Daniel responded that she had changed him by helping him see the world differently. Later, as the girls played together under garden lights, Victor reflected that despite years of leading a corporation through major challenges, nothing had taught him more about leadership than witnessing that simple moment of connection. Daniel insisted he had done nothing extraordinary, only said hello. Victor replied that sometimes hello was everything. Watching their daughter's joyful laughter, Daniel understood how small acts of kindness could illuminate entire lives. The story of Daniel Carter and Maya Langford would inspire lasting transformation within the company, reminding all who witnessed it that connection transcends words and inclusion begins with awareness. It demonstrated that acknowledging someone in a language they understand can reshape perspectives and relationships in a world that often moves too quickly to notice those at the edges. Daniel's simple gesture created ripples far beyond a single evening, proving that everyone deserves recognition, belonging, and a voice, spoken or signed. And it all began with one father who noticed a lonely child across a crowded room and chose to reach out when others simply passed by.